And thank you, Mark, for this great start. And I think he stimulated us with a lot of exciting thoughts as we begin to go through the rest of the panels. The next panel is to peel the onion a little bit from the point of view of the enterprises and the customers of this technology. And I'd like to introduce the moderator of the panel, my good friend, Rajan Raghavan. Right there. Rajan is right here. And Rajan is the CEO and co-founder of The Fabric, which is a co-creator of companies. And he's, of course, a serial entrepreneur from his prior experience. And now within Fabric, in the last 2.5 years, the team has created 5 new companies. So please welcome Rajan, who will introduce the rest of the panelists.
Thanks very much, Prem. Today, I'm actually pinch hitting for the actual moderator, so I'm the better looking one who came along in here. So Chandra, unfortunately, had to drop out in the last minute. So what I'm going to do is have the panelists introduce themselves. Before we get started, Prem was very kind to do an introduction on the Fabric. The Fabric itself is focused on the cloud infrastructure and data center, virtualized data center space. So this topic is very near and dear to me because we have been creating companies in this space, and it would be great to get the perspective of some very distinguished panelists over here, starting with Alan. Alan is with Coca-Cola, and I'd like to have him start the introduction, then Nandwani with Twitter, and then Suneet, sorry, to get started on this. So Alan, if you could get started. Introduction.
There we go. My name is Alan Boehme. I'm the Chief Enterprise Architect for the Coca-Cola Company and Head of IT Strategy and Global Innovation for the company as well. I've been with the company 4 years. I've been a number of other organizations from ING, the bank, the financial institution in the Netherlands, to DHL, to General Electric over the years, and been involved with cloud computing probably going back, I'm going to guess, first thing I did with it was probably in 2007 when I was at ING when we started experimenting with it.
Nandwani is with Twitter. Nandwani?
Yeah, hi. I'm Nandwani Ramani, and I run the engineering effectiveness team at Twitter. I'm relatively new to Twitter. Been there a little shy of a year. And when I say engineering effectiveness, basically it's the developer infrastructure. So we are the layer that actually connects to the cloud. And prior to my joining Twitter, I was with Oracle for about 5 years, came in through the Sun Microsystems acquisition. And at Oracle, I ran the Java, all of Java, basically the Java platform group, and also the Internet of Things as a cloud service.
Suneet with eBay and Suneet.
Sure. So my name is Suneet Nandwani. I lead the cloud infrastructure as a service team at eBay and PayPal. So essentially our internal private cloud offering. I think everybody is aware of eBay and PayPal and doesn't need any introduction, but just from a scale perspective, I think it would be good to share that eBay enables about $255 billion in commerce every year. So the scale's really large, and the internal private cloud that powers eBay and PayPal actually supporting all production, dev, QA. So it is a pretty massive, probably one of the top 5 clouds in the world today.
So what I'd like to get started, thanks very much, folks. What I'd like to get started off with is questions on the large-scale trends in the cloud business. Amazon obviously is dominating out there in the public cloud, along with Microsoft Azure, and now HP's got Helion, Cisco has got its Nimbus cloud. Do companies really need to create their own clouds with all of these offerings out there? What is the trends in the space? Or some of the other web scale companies run on bare metal, many of their internal stuff. So I'd like to get each of your perspectives on where your organizations, or where do you see the general trend? Alan, starting with you.
So what I'll try to do is sort of talk from a legacy corporation. I mean, Coca-Cola is 129 years old, and sometimes I think our systems are that old, to be honest with you. But when you look at a corporation, some of the major concerns get around security of data and access to data and all of that. So the concept of actually moving everything out to a public cloud, it's not going to happen. And it may not be that from a technical perspective that it's not doable, but it really becomes more from a political or from a security perspective. When I say security, it really becomes the auditability. If you look at what holds us back in many cases is that ISACA, which provides all the training to the auditors end up being 3 or 4 years behind where the technology is. Therefore, we end up trying to apply rules that were meant for internal services or managed services to cloud providers. It just doesn't work. So I think from a large legacy corporation standpoint, hybrid is something that is very real, is very doable. Certainly our consumer-facing things are already out in Google today. They're already out at Amazon. They're already out in CenturyLink. More and more of our internal systems that do not require restricted data or restricted access are moving out as well. But it's always going to be a hybrid environment for the legacy providers, legacy organizations, I think.
So having been in an organization such as Oracle, which not nearly as old as Coca-Cola, of course, but certainly is a big enterprise with a large investment in IT, and now to Twitter, which is on its growth path, but still really small, I think, agree that hybrid cloud is the reality. And in some cases, I think many companies, including my ex-employers, are not yet fully invested in cloud. Now, of course, Oracle Public Cloud is becoming a big thing, but it is very hard to move existing legacy applications and get them, and including hardware, which is old, and that's why Docker and other things I think are so popular. But I will say for companies that are much smaller, and especially the new startups that I'm seeing, Amazon or any other cloud provider, which today happens to be Amazon as the head of the pack, is certainly the quick and easy way to go. And even mid-sized companies, I would say Netflix is a great classic example of somebody who's managed to do DevOps in a very successful manner, relying on the public cloud. And security, I think, in fact, I think Coca-Cola, you were quoted on the whole border corp thing. So security, I don't want to dive into that right now. We can save that. But so I do believe in this short-term hybrid is certainly the model, especially for larger companies. But I think we're quickly heading to a path where public cloud is going to be the most relevant. And then security is another issue, but I also think that it's moving down to the devices rather than the network layer, because that boundary between what is internal to the firewall versus external is fast disappearing. And it's such a gray area that everybody is going to start relying on actually foundational security rather than relying on inside the firewall. So.
Yeah, so actually I would have an agreement with my fellow panelists on this matter broadly. I think the answer is a little different for a big enterprise and a mid-sized business. So mid-enterprise, the big, large enterprises, like we run a private cloud, we are not really on the public cloud except in a very small way. And to a large extent, the issue has been, obviously, security has been a big deal. And I'm glad that it's getting a lot of attention now, but even today, I think the level of comfort around the security that you can get on a public clouds is limited. The second part of it is just legacy applications. I think Coca-Cola, as you mentioned, Alan, and eBay is not that different. There's a lot of legacy applications still which are not cloud ready. And frankly, I mean, to really use the cloud effectively, there is a lot of transformation that needs to happen in the enterprise before you can get there. Now, the answer for a mid-sized company could actually be fairly different. I think for a mid-sized company, it absolutely makes sense to be looking at the public cloud first because some of those things don't apply. And I think, and at a high level, I think there is a space for both. And if I look at our company as well, hybrid cloud is definitely something on the strategy. There are some workloads which are cloud ready and which are very suitable for moving on the public cloud, and we're aggressively looking at that.
Just a follow-on question on that. All of you talked about security being the inhibition for adopting clouds. Does it really matter if it's a private cloud or a public cloud? Is the security issues very similar? I mean, once you expose a cloud is a cloud. You could go to Amazon Virtual Private Cloud and use in different ways. So like to get that.
Yeah, so I guess security from a technical perspective is the same regardless. The challenges that you have when you start looking at public is there's a word that large corporations, be it Coke or anybody, throws out there. It's the indemnification clause. And when you were running things in your own data center, when you're running things as a managed hosted environment, you could negotiate an indemnification clause that basically protected your business. You move out into the public space, I have not found any cloud provider that will provide you an indemnification clause that's equivalent to what you get in a managed service environment. So you have that as an issue. The second issue is open source, and that a lot of corporations still have not been able to endorse the use of open source and have come up with ways to contractually allow the use of open source within their corporation because, again, they're afraid of being sued, they're afraid of being, again, the lack of that indemnification clause. So purely from a technical perspective, you have, or a business perspective, you have those. Then the other piece of this whole thing around security is the skill set. The large legacy organizations do not have the skill sets that the young, agile organizations have in order to be able to put in many of the capabilities that provide the security and other things that will get the cloud to really take off. So we are, many years ago when companies went to ERPs, they outsourced all of the technology people. In many ways, they outsourced many of the smart people. And we're left with people in the organization that were business facing, that worried about process, and that's put the large legacy corporations at a disadvantage as well in being able to move forward.
I don't know that I have much else to add. Indemnification is something that I feel strongly about as well, especially having been at Oracle where it is a thing and it is very hard. So I don't know how much more I can add, but I do agree, like I said earlier, things within the firewall, especially for companies like Twitter and other social networking companies, I think the concept of security, because we are so public and all of our data is so public, and it's very different than being in healthcare or other verticals that have different challenges. But I still think security at the end of it, and the previous talk did highlight a lot of ways you can get attacked, are very similar. And for companies such as Twitter, it doesn't matter whether it's internal or external. Pretty much everything we do is external, essentially. So we do need to get to a point where the public cloud is actually secure and safe. And certainly until we get to a point where we can have a total public cloud and you have to trust the generic public cloud providers. I do want to say one thing, having been in hardware myself, I do believe hardware level security is going to play a big part in security itself. Like if you look at ARM, they are now coming up with 64-bit on the server side processors, and they have a trusted execution environment, which I think when you get down to device level security, it's easier to authenticate and put keys on the device and such. So I do think that will play another additional part outside of just having security on the back end on the cloud side itself.
So I'm going to change the conversation, if you don't mind, Suneet, a little bit and come back.
Yeah.
What business impact do you think, Suneet, the cloud has had on eBay? Or did it provide an end-user benefit? Is it for the application developers? Or is it just the latest buzzword and the impact is really...
Sure. But I'm actually going to give a little bit of a perspective on security as well, because I'm fairly passionate about it. So sorry, I'm going to go back to the previous question. So I think on the security side, there is a pretty big difference in the public and the private cloud, at least the environment that we see today. What we are dealing with on a private cloud, I mean, I look at something like OpenStack as an Android versus like an AWS or a Google Cloud Engine as iOS, because we can actually modify OpenStack and really make it a lot more secure than what we believe that public cloud providers are nowhere near the level of security that we need. But we've actually internally done a lot of engineering to run at a much, much higher level of security. And that's gone all the way down to the infrastructure. So I would say, at least as those things stand today, and the way we look at the world, there is a pretty big difference in the amount of security that we can offer. But I think you need a fair amount of sophistication within your enterprise to be able to do that. And given the scale that we run, we do have that level of sophistication, so we are using that. So going back to your next question, so about the difference that the clouds had, I think the big difference is, one is like, one of the things that happened, I don't know if some of you read about it, we did a press release on this, that we moved all of PayPal, mid-tier, and frontier traffic, and the front-end traffic, about 90% to the cloud, to the internal cloud. That happened over the last 12 to 18 months. And the big resistance to that actually was security. So we had to overcome a lot of the security challenges before we could do that. And I think what we are seeing internally is that we are finally getting to the point, it's been a multi-year journey, where we can actually offer our developers the level of agility that they need without really having a big compromise on security. I think there is still, we're not there yet from a security point of view, absolutely. But I mean, I'm really excited about the fact that the developer agility that we are seeing, and I think that is one of the biggest difference I see, is our dev QA environments and what it takes our developers to now develop applications is so much more seamless today. So it's a huge impact from an innovation point of view and agility point of view for the organization.
Nandwani, have the tool sets been keeping up with the need to proliferate private clouds and public clouds within your environment, or what kind of cloud do you adopt within eBay? I mean,
within Twitter. So currently we do have our own private. We have data centers, and we did go the traditional route. But as Twitter is growing, we're finding it so much harder to absorb the startups and, to your point, the younger generation of people who just want the polyglot and want to just up and pick up whatever is there and run with it kind of mindset. And it's very hard to enable them. So one thing is with the public cloud, and our tendency is to shift toward public cloud, I think. So I would label us as a hybrid right now in some sense. What we're seeing more and more, though, is a lot of the tools that work on Amazon and AWS are not available on anything else. So it's kind of like you get handcuffed to these, the tool chain and the tool sets with the public cloud. So that's another, I don't know whether that's a benefit or not, but everybody's doing that if you look at Apple with its own tool chain and stuff. So we have ended up in this hybrid state where we do have a dependency on Puppet and Chef and all the usual things, and we have SREs. So our DevOps environment is in this transition phase where we're neither here nor there. So in some sense, I wish as a customer of all of these things for my own teams, to get to a state of continuous delivery, it would be better for us if we were either entirely public or private. Because I think, and I'd like to hear what the others have to say, hybrid kind of puts you in this awkward state where you're neither in a realm of managing your own destiny nor at the reliance of a third-party provider for everything and have it seamless. So I feel like Twitter is right now at that inflection point, so to say, in its destiny of being more Google-like or Netflix-like, and we're...
Again, looking at legacy corporation, large organization where IT is not the driver of the product and services. Sort of two different thoughts here. One, when we talk about cloud, we tend to focus, especially with younger companies, on infrastructure as a service or platform as a service, and we forget about software as a service. So we have to look at cloud as all of these things, because that's where the large legacy organizations are concentrating. And there's always the mentality of buy before build. Whereas I think at Twitter and eBay, you're probably building more than you're buying for what you're doing. So when you're dealing with whether it's a Coca-Cola, a GE, a DHL, you have a different mindset. So when I look at what's going on and where the lack of tools are, the tools that are available, there's an orchestration issue. It is missing completely around the environment. Nobody has really solved orchestration across multiple clouds, or even to go into platform and IaaS, and then you start throwing into software. Nobody has solved for that single pane of glass from an operational standpoint across all of these environments. So there's a lot of opportunities there in this space. But if I go back, and I'm going to sort of age myself here for all of you. I see a few others with more gray hair than me, we'll see. But there was back in 99, 2000, Irving Waldowski-Berger, Dr. Waldowski-Berger, who was at IBM, he put out a paper, and it's a great speech. It was called Back to the Future. And what he was talking about at the time was that we had undone all of these things that the mainframe had provided us and TSO had provided us early on, and now we were going to need to rebuild these things going forward as we moved from client server into the web. And now we're starting to see this. There's been great changes that have been made in storage over the last 10 years. There's been great advances that have been made in compute. There's been great advances that have been made in other areas. The one place that hasn't kept up is network. We literally have the same type of networking technology and approaches from 10, 15 years ago. This is a great opportunity for change. We need tools there that will change the networking. SDN is not the solution. SDN is the solution. It's working for a lot of the. We're starting to see it in the ISPs. We're starting to see it in some of the large cloud companies here. But you're not seeing it in the legacy organizations, and it will take a long time. So there's a whole bunch of tools in the networking space, and rethinking networking is going to have to take place for the large enterprises to really be able to take advantage of cloud.
I promise I didn't pay Alec to say that. Networking being a pet topic for myself. Well, Alan, coming back to you from a legacy corporation standpoint, has cloud made a business impact for you, or it is a necessary evil you just have to deal with?
The consumer or our internal customers or external customers are driving the IT organizations today. It's not being IT driven out, it's being consumer customer driven in. Therefore, because the availability of all these products and services, it's making a huge impact. It's impacting agility, flexibility, and we have to become an organization in IT that is not an organization known as the No organization, NO, but the organizations that's known as No, KNOW. That's the transition that we have to get into.
I actually would like to second that, and I think the previous HP speaker, Mark, was saying the same thing. For us, we don't mind paying the extra premium, even if the cloud, say public cloud, is more expensive, and that's a whole other topic on pricing, but getting to market quickly, having the features ready, and having continuous delivery at a pace that's where you can outpace the others is more important, especially for companies like Twitter and Facebook and others. Then, especially in the enterprise, we had longer release cycles, and there maybe the cost and the benefits are different, but I think agility in a continuous delivery aspect, I think, outweighs any premium you might be paying for the tooling or, the SDNs or what have you that you have to do. That's from a smaller company perspective.
Suneet, I know you said you cannot give numbers. You warned me before you came on the panel or here. But I'm going to ask you anyway. Can you quantify what is the business impact that the cloud has on eBay?
Well, I can talk in percentages. So the business impact, so I think from a production point of view, most of our use cases today run on the internal cloud. So we have like 2 generations of cloud, OpenStack being our 2nd generation cloud. Almost 90% of PayPal's front ends is on cloud, as I mentioned before. Actually, the number's probably more significant for the eBay side of the business. So I think we've seen for the stateless applications, definitely for the Hadoops and for our search infrastructure, the move hasn't been quite as rapid because the virtualization technologies, frankly, from a performance point of view, are a little lacking right now for supporting those kinds of use cases. But as I said before, I think the biggest thing is about the change in the developer experience, right? And we've sort of modified all of our tooling to be much more cloud friendly because that's really what the driver for cloud is for us, rather than, as Nandwani said, it's not as much about efficiency, but that's a great side benefit that we get. But it's really the big motive, the big business driver is agility, but agility with security, right?
So we're running, I think, out of time a little bit, but I'll open up the floor for a couple of questions before I have the panelists summarize their thoughts on this topic here. Any questions?
Adoption of startup company products in these kind of companies.
Yeah. So you guys talk to startups. By the way, I've got 5 startups who would like to talk to you folks.
Absolutely. I mean, we can't solve the entire universe of problems by ourselves. There is a level of technical sophistication, but it's definitely, we are not in the business to be developing every technology out there. So we absolutely look for help. And startups, in fact, our SDN solution came out. We adopted it when the company that we bought it from was still a startup. So yes, absolutely.
Nandwani.
Yeah, absolutely.
Twitter, all these web scale companies have the reputation of building everything in-house.
It's not necessarily true. Not everybody's Google. So we still do look for, excuse me, we still do acquire a lot of talent, and at smaller scale R&D is not as easy either. But having said that, we do have hackathons, and a lot of ideas within Twitter are born within the company. But we do a lot of acquisitions, including on the back end. We did one with 10Xer recently on developer productivity. So we do also do more back-end-ish acquisitions.
I'll give a little qualified answer to that. For those areas where I can have a competitive advantage, I talk to seed people. I want people that are in seed stage. I don't want people that are later. Because I don't want you selling to my competition, just to be right honest. In those things that are more core to my infrastructure and my operations, I really want you after maybe a B, but definitely C is when I'll start looking. I won't look at anything earlier than that because I can't put the operation at risk. There was I recently went to a conference. The assistant chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was there, and he really put it into perspective, and I think it applies to the cloud. He says the government is starting to look at things as what they call platforms and payloads. And for years, last few years, we've all been talking about platforms. Platforms are something that are expensive, take a long time to build. Payloads are something that you can shoot, fire, and forget. And there's no point in shooting, as he said it, shooting $1 million missile at a $10,000 rocket to try to knock it out of the sky. So from startups, I'm looking for low-cost things, and they may only be used once or twice for a short period of time that give me that competitive advantage and serve a need. It's not to build these platforms. I want to get out of the platform space.
Okay. Well, it was a very thoughtful and very good panel. Thanks very much, folks, for spending the time. And if I would summarize it, if I understand it right, is hybrid cloud is the way all of you folks are going, and security is front and center, a major concern. And you would still buy potentially from startups, so I'll talk to you folks after this. Thanks very much. Thanks, everybody.